my frame for optionality is, well, you can make your own luck. So look for those asymmetric opportunities and just snap them up. Just build a portfolio over years. And you don't know, you can never be sure if they will pay off if you take one of these speculative plays. And probably they won't. The chances are against you in any given one of them, but the idea is you're building a portfolio. One of them is going to pay off at some point in time, at which point you're going to be okay. So you just keep stacking up opportunities wherever you see them and maximizing your chances of getting lucky.
Richard Meadows, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure to have you on, man. So optionality, what is optionality?
The simplest definition of optionality is the right but not the obligation to take action. So you can do something if you want, but you don't have to. And my argument is that optionality is a pretty good proxy for human flourishing in general, and just being able to maximize your capabilities as a human being and have the maximum range of possibilities open to you.
So would that suggest that naturally as humans, our level of well-being and flourishing is directly proportional to how many different options we can take in life?
I think it's less of a quantitative thing and more qualitative. So it's about the caliber of the options that are available to you. So I draw a distinction between having a lot of choices in the consumer capitalism frame, where you can go to the supermarket and choose between umpteen different varieties of pasta sauce or laundry detergent, but like having high quality options is more important. So being able to work in a career that you find meaningful or satisfying, or being able to have good relationships with the people around you, that's really the key. And it's not so much about being sort of floating on cloud nine and being euphoric all of the time, but also having the right to choose to do things that are really hard or that involve some degree of not necessarily suffering, but perhaps some degree of hardship or sacrifice. Because it's sort of a broader definition of human flourishing that goes beyond the simple hedonistic pleasures.
How do you see optionality manifesting in the real world then? That's a nice concept, but what does it actually look like when it enters our lives?
Yeah, so I've got a framework for cultivating optionality that basically looks like taking this lens and applying it to all the little decisions of daily life. So I'll give you a couple of concrete examples. So what we're really looking for overall is any sort of decision or action you can take that has a small cost or a small downside. It doesn't require a lot of money or effort to take out the option, but it leads to an open-ended upside. So it could have basically unlimited possibility, and it could be really transformative for your life. So one simple example of that would be, emailing someone you admire that takes you 2 minutes or whatever it might be to pen an email to someone. And amazingly, with the power of the internet, you can get in touch with just about anyone that you can imagine. And then they might even write you back, and it could be the beginning of a mentorship, or you could have some kind of relationship, or just find it to be a meaningful interaction. So the downside cost there is very small. It's not that hard to do, and the possible positive outcome is very large or open-ended. So in most cases, nothing will happen. Maybe they don't email you back, and that's fine because you've lost essentially nothing. But in the event that they do, there's a sort of the potential for transformative upside. So my idea is to take this framework of optionality, which is a concept from the world of finance, and just look at a lot of decisions through this framework and look for those asymmetries. So what's the downside? What's the upside? And what can I do that has a pretty small effort and might lead to a large payoff? And then just systematically collect as many of those options as you can and build a sort of portfolio. So even if most of them don't work out, you're sort of constantly attuning yourself to serendipity and luck. It's sort of a system for making your own luck. So yeah, I could give more examples of those sort of asymmetries if you like. There's also the negative optionality, which is something like being in debt. So if you take on a consumer debt, you have the obligation to do something, but not the right. So it's an inversion of the original formula. And again, one of the most powerful things I would argue that anyone can do is to remove those sources of negative optionality in your life. So be extremely cautious of situations where the upside, the possible return, the reward, the bounty is limited. So it's fixed, it's capped. But the potential downside is bottomless or infinite. So this is the sort of the Russian roulette archetype where you spin the barrel, maybe you win $100 or sort of impress your mates at the bar, but in the event that you lose everything, lights out. So that's the framework. Hunt for the asymmetric opportunities which are loaded in your favor, and steer well clear of the options and decisions which have a negative asymmetry, where there's a possibility that it will lead to some kind of total ruin.
What are some of the other common situations that you see people getting negative optionality wrong, or that negative asymmetry?
Yeah, so in the financial realm, which is my sort of main area of expertise, one of them would be something quite boring, like let's say you've got a car and laws in the UK, but you drive around without insurance. Now, the potential upside from not bothering to take out insurance, I mean like indemnity or liability insurance, is you're saving X $100 or pounds on the insurance premium, right? Now, the potential downside is that you T-bone someone's Jaguar at the intersection, and you're on the hook for, whatever it might be, several £100,000, or you're sort of out of commission altogether. So I think insurance is like almost an inversion of the concept of optionality, because it protects you against those large downside risks. Another good example might be during the COVID-19 situation, or disaster preparedness more generally, whereby it's helpful to have a bunch of medicines that you need stockpiled, and some basic food and water and supplies in the event that something unexpected happens. It costs you very little to take those precautions. I mean, you're gonna eat the food either way. It's sort of bugger all in the scheme of things. And in the event that you need it, you're really, really, really going to need it. So failing to take simple protective measures like that, I would also argue, is sort of a failure of imagination, and a kind of a common risk management mistake, where people are just like not necessarily thinking about it through this lens of like, there are these big risks out here. Do I have an opportunity to mitigate them by taking some relatively cheap, straightforward actions?
The number one rule of the game is to never be out of being able to play.
Exactly right. Yep. You can take risks. You can lose. It's fine. It's necessary to lose, but you can never lose so bad that you can't come back.
Did you see Bill Ackman's trade at the start of this year?
I don't think so. Tell me about it.
So it's being dubbed the new Big Short. So obviously The Big Short was that famous film made about the fella Christian Bale played that shorted the housing market. And Bill Ackman, who I'm sure that you know, a very famous short seller on Wall Street, he was the guy that was adamant that Herbalife was a scam, and I think he's still short on Herbalife, even though he hasn't taken them down yet. The beginning of this year, he foresaw that COVID was going to have a significantly bigger impact on the entire world financial market than anybody had priced in. So he took out a very special type of insurance, which is kind of like put options. It's a bit sort of complex to explain, and I definitely can't do it, but there's also some YouTube videos out there if anyone wants to dig into it further. But the long and short of it is he made more money than the man from The Big Short, and the difference is it didn't take him 3.5 years, it took him about 4 weeks. Billions and billions and billions of dollars in the space of about 4 weeks, because this man foresaw that. And that's kind of the same, right? Like the potential risk that he had was to just continue ticking over with this particular type of insurance, but the upside was so asymmetric in his favor that it made total sense.
No, that's interesting. So the guy who I've learned the most about optionality from is called Nassim Taleb, and he's an options trader. And he did something very similar during the 2008-2009 global financial crisis, whereby I think he was buying put options. I think he was buying out of money puts, and he was sort of every day loading up and taking these small manageable losses, and he could see something bad was going to happen with the build-up of accumulation of risk within the financial system. And so when it all went to pieces, everyone lost their shirt except for him, because he'd been waiting for just such an opportunity with these small, steady, predictable kind of losses. And then the upside when it came, is the same kind of scenario where it's essentially it could run on forever. And so my understanding is that he made his fortune by being a bit of a contrarian and positioning himself to profit from misfortune and disaster. Kudos to Bill Ackman too. I have to have a look at that.
Yeah, he crushed it, man. You're going to love that story. Another good example of negative asymmetry would be having unprotected sex or texting whilst driving. Like, you're talking about a marginal increase in pleasure for a potential 18-year commitment or a health risk, and then the equivalent for texting whilst driving. Like, you're looking at potentially time in jail, a fine at the bottom end, or ending some poor person's life because you're not properly looking. All for what? For replying to a meme a little bit quicker in a group chat that everyone's going to forget about within the next 5 seconds.
Yeah, I love that. I wish I'd included the Unprotected Sex one in the book. That's fantastic.
It's a conversation that we've had a number of times, looking for these sort of asymmetric opportunities and avoiding these asymmetric risks. Do you see any asymmetries manifesting more in the sort of social realm rather than just in the financial realm? Did you come across any of those?
Yeah, I have. I think most of them are positive asymmetries that you can exploit, but I'd rather I'll touch on the negative ones to begin with. So I think the main negative one would be just this social contagion effect, whereby the people you surround yourself by are responsible. They kind of shape you and mold you, and they shape your outcomes in a really surprising way, just because humans are so malleable, and so we're so good at kind of unconsciously imitating one another. So something that I say, which might come across as quite mercenary and cruel in the book, but I think is actually a necessary thing to do, is to excise the really toxic people from your life if you're unlucky enough to have them in your life, and perhaps having taken steps to try and actually help them and do something about it. But there's this phenomenon whereby things don't get worse in a linear fashion. They tend to spiral downwards faster and faster. So if your social group, if your friends or your family or whoever it might be constantly exerting a negative influence over you, the hard and probably correct thing to do is to get some distance from them. You may or may not cut them out of your life altogether, but definitely sort of acknowledge this idea that you can you don't have to feel obligated to be tethered to someone just because you have a shared history indefinitely. And I certainly found that quite powerful idea myself, having been brought up with the notion that it's very you have to love unconditionally from now until the end of time for your friends or family, and there's no way to get any distance from that. And then the more positive, happy side of the equation is just it's a big old world, and it's never been easier to connect with people, and it's incredibly easy to get in touch with people. I mean, I know this. I'm a journalist by trade, and it's surprisingly easy to find people's contact details online. So it's mostly a question of I don't know what you'd call it, motivation or confidence or something like that, where you can put yourself out there, and sort of find your tribe of people more easily than at any other point in history. And the manner in which you do so usually involves something like being good at email, or having a presence on Twitter, or on contributing to open source libraries if you're a programmer, or inhabiting certain forums, or putting yourself, the next level version of that would be changing your geographic proximity. So actually upping and moving to San Francisco if you're big into tech, or New York if you're big into finance, or whatever it might be, and putting yourself in the proximity of the kind of people who you are likely to get along with. So that's like not as an attractive an option insofar as it requires you to live in San Francisco. But there's lots of things that you can do to sort of build social capital that don't require a lot of effort, and that could potentially change your life. And I'm sort of speaking from experience here, having done that almost by accident. And I think that people have this idea that you can't really be strategic about things like relationships, like it's somehow it's gauche, or it's not the done thing. So I think if you apply this framework where you actually say, hey, this is important to me, I'm going to put in effort in a strategic, cultivated, deliberate way, that's really powerful. Just having that realization, and thinking more carefully about where you're devoting your time and your energy.
Do you have any triggers that help you to continue doing that in life? One of the things that I often find is I'll come across a concept like this that we're discussing here, or pretty much anything else to do with personal growth. And the issue, for the most part, isn't my buy-in. I fully believe that this could have a really positive impact in my life, but I need to instantiate it somehow. I need to have a trigger or some sort of little mantra or a reminder of some kind that allows me to actually enforce it into reality.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of chunking down difficult concepts into little mantras that you can remind yourself of. I definitely have a few of those myself. Actually, I have almost like a catch-all mantra. I'm not sure if I should even say it out loud, but I will. There's a line. I hope it doesn't lose its magic juju.
It won't.
So there's a line that goes, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do, which is from Epictetus. I think you're sort of big into the Stoics, aren't you? So you'd probably be familiar with him. But yeah, it's just this idea of there ain't nothing to it but to do it. So I have little tricks like that. But my main weapon for making all these trade-offs in a smoother fashion, making these short-term pain, long-term gain type trade-offs, is basically to systematize everything. And what I mean by that is put in place certain practices and habits and constraints that just make the process of getting to where I want to be smooth, so it doesn't require willpower on a daily basis. And in the realm of finance, an example of that would be instead of sort of saying to myself, I'd like to save X amount of money, and I'll try really hard not to blow my pay packet, just to set up an automatic transfer after payday that goes straight out of the bank account, straight into your investment account, and then you have to live on whatever's left over. And at no point in the process do you feel friction or pain. It's perfectly automated, and you just get by, and you sort of adapt to the new normal of however much you've left yourself for spending money. And there's a bunch of tricks like that, which I find really useful for both practically in terms of actually implementing these what I think of as trades, and psychologically in terms of knowing that no matter what your outcome is, you're putting in the work. So you're following your system day after day, and you're doing the right things. And maybe it won't pay off immediately. You don't know exactly when it will pay off, and you don't know what will the payoff look like. But you can feel good about the fact that you're following your system, and you're stacking up what I think of as these juicy asymmetric options. So I should probably give a concrete example of that as well, which would be something like reading books. I think is just like changed my life probably like no other practice has. And the reason that I like to read books, I mean, quite apart from the enjoyment factor, is that they're cheap. You can buy them cheap, or you can get them from the library for free. And then you don't know what's in there. You don't know what idea you're going to encounter, what new practice you're going to pick up, and you sort of get to gaze out upon the world through someone else's eyes. So that's the small cost and the very large potential upside. And then if you have this practice, just read a fucking book. Like read a book rather than watch TV or something like that. Just read a fucking book, and then it will pay off at some point. You don't know how. You don't know what it's going to be until you get there, and it'll surprise you every time. So the practice is really what matters. It's not sort of like you have to see the future and predict it's going to be exactly this, and this is going to lead me on to this is going to lead me to this path, and that's going to result in this opportunity. If you become the kind of person who does such and such activity, and I would include sort of reading in that bracket, it's going to pay off. It's just going to pay off, and you can feel good about that.
So much to go through there, man. It sounds like I'm talking to a kindred spirit here. Certainly one of the things that I've done this year, which has made a big difference, a little mantra I've had in my head, has been, this is why you're here. So when things get hard or you feel discomfort, the reminder is that that's what you're here for. You're here for the slightly uncomfortable learning experience. It's because you're learning something difficult and worthwhile. You're there for the burn in the gym. You're there for the slight level of hunger or tiredness or whatever it is at the end of the day, because you are on a calorie restricted diet, or because you've trained hard that day, or whatever it might be. This is why you're here. Lean into your discomfort as if you invited it through the door. And then talking about systematizing some things that you want to do, a good hack for that: sleep with your phone outside of your bedroom, and don't watch Netflix after a particular time at night. The only choice that you have to do is to read a book or go to bed early. Either way, you win. So those are two ways that I've instantiated things that I want as long-term lifestyle changes into a daily practice. One thing that I can see as a potential problem here is optionality being polarized with optimizing. Like if you're always exploring new options, you can't exploit and double down into certain things. How do you deal with that?
Right, yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, so that's the fundamental trade-off, is exploring and exploiting. So, well, to begin with, I think it's never a bad idea to maintain some level of optionality. So, in other words, to devote some small portion of your time to be constantly exploring and opening up possibility right until you're on death's door, kind of thing. But then, after a certain point, you do have to switch from trying to open up new possibilities to just actually execute on something and sort of grab onto it with both hands. So my model for that is the optimal strategy for switching from exploratory mode to exploit mode is a function of the volatility of the domain in question and of your time frame in that domain. So it actually varies depending on what it is that we are talking about. So let's say that you're in your teens or early 20s, and you're trying to get a handle on fitness and nutrition and workouts and stuff. It's a good idea to try a bunch of things and see what sticks and see what you like and dislike, just again from the point of view of not trying to do battle with yourself and just make life easy on yourself. So that would be a point where you want to do a lot of exploration, but obviously you don't want to be that guy who's constantly doing the hot new thing and never actually makes progress with anything. It's the disease of fuck-arounditis. So you have to commit to something. And then in that particular domain, the volatility is not increasing. So that implies that as soon as you've found something that you are into and that you feel good about, you actually basically lock that in and just get after it. indefinitely. And you can keep trying little things here and there, but you should do just enough exploration to find out about your own personal preferences and what works for you, and then just get after it. So the reason that you should approach it that way is because the human body and the sort of what would you call it, like the interventions for physical fitness are not changing. Like the barbell, or well, calisthenics is thousands of years old, and then the barbell I think is at least a couple hundred years old, and dumbbells go right back to the ancient Greeks. So the body itself, like, it changes on an evolutionary time scale, but it doesn't change over the course of your own life, except in the sense of aging. So because the domain is relatively stable, you don't benefit from constantly exploring and seeing if new opportunities are cropping up. Like, it's not like the laws of physics will change one day and suddenly CrossFit will be out, and horseback steeplechase will be in or something. Like, there's no point in positioning yourself for uncertainty, because there is no real source of uncertainty there. And then to give a counterpoint of an opposite sort of scenario, if we talk about career planning, the argument that I make is that you have to be open to exploration, much more so than in a domain like physical health, because the world is changing. There is a lot of volatility, and you can't necessarily lock yourself into something and then put your feet up and just exploit. Because let's say you have this model where you're a specialist, you're very good at one thing, and this is the old model of the job for life, 40 years and a golden handshake. You lock yourself into that, you don't broaden your skills, and then the robot apocalypse comes along and takes your job. Or one of these sort of it doesn't even have to be one of these outlandish AI scenarios, just the more mundane reality of industries collapsing. So you've sort of concentrated all of your career capital in this one domain, and it serves you very well over the short term. And what you can't see in the background is this large accumulation of sort of silent risk. So you might be all right, you might make it to retirement and nothing bad happens. But if your job suddenly gets outsourced to to Bangladesh or India or whatever it might be, you're screwed, right? You haven't sort of diversified yourself. You don't have options. So that's the downside resilience case for always being exploratory in a domain which is changing quickly. But the more attractive side of that is is looking at the upside. Like thinking about emerging technologies and emerging fields. Things are changing. Things change now within the course of our lifetimes. I mean, within the course of like a single year or certainly a single decade. And if you have broad set of skills and you are interested, you take an active interest in the world, and you're sort of a curious person, you can position yourself to benefit from these things. I mean, like, I think we were talking about Bitcoin just before we hit record. Like, imagine being one of those guys who was buying Bitcoin for 30 cents each or whatever, because you're a geek and you are interested in this new weird money thing that no one else has ever heard of. Just because you're sort of taking a broad interest in life, and not just being like, oh, I'm the chief widget maker at the widget factory, and I'm good at what I do, and I'll never broaden my horizons any further than that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, man. Yeah, totally does. The that insight of optionality being inverse to the level of volatility within the system makes a whole ton of sense. And I guess this year, COVID, uproar, upheaval, it's just the year of optionality. But if the future's uncertain, how do we become more confident about our decisions? Shouldn't we just constantly be worried about the future, especially given that technological change and society is moving so fast now?
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to what I find to be psychologically comforting about optionality. So at this point, it might help to sort of mention my model for what are the raw ingredients of optionality. So I break it down to financial capital, i.e. how much savings you have, and how little debt you have. health capital, how fit and healthy and energetic you are. Social capital, the strength and quantity of your relationships, and knowledge capital, which is the depth and breadth of your skills and experiences. And if you focus on all four of those buckets, and you're sure not to neglect any of them, I think you can kind of feel confident about the future, even though you don't know what's coming. Because let's say 20 years from now, I wouldn't have a clue what I'm going to be doing in a fine grained kind of a sense. I don't know what sport I'll be playing. I don't know exactly who my friends will be, and I don't know what I'll be doing for work. But it will, in any possible conceivable scenario, it will be extremely useful for me to have all four of those buckets full, so that I'm in a good position to execute on whatever makes sense at that point in time in my life and my career and that future version of me. So I find it extremely comforting. I mean, probably the simplest and most obvious version of this is that anyone who's ever been in debt, or who's just had a shitty job and sort of struggling to make rent, it's just a horrible position to be in. Like, you feel powerless, and you can't relax, and it sort of bleeds over into every other area of your life. And getting yourself in a position where you've cleared your consumer debt, for example, and you've got like a bit of an emergency fund in case the shit hits the fan, it's such a powerful thing to do. And it doesn't actually, it's not changing anything in the sense that maybe you still work the same job and your life looks more or less the same, but just even psychologically, it's a powerful position to be in. So yeah, my argument is that if you build up these sort of central assets, these real core valuable sources of optionality, that alone is extremely comforting. It's never not going to be useful to have a big chunk of change sitting in the bank, so you're well positioned. Maybe an investment opportunity comes along. Maybe you're the guy who finds out about the 30-cent Bitcoins, right? Like, maybe you have an idea to start a small business, or you want to quit your job and take a sabbatical and launch a podcast, or whatever it might be, right? Like, it's always going to be useful. And you like, I don't know, you just feel a certain sense of security and possibility when you have all of these things topped up. So I think that, yeah, the future is kind of scary, but you can take some of the sting out of it, and maybe even make it into an exciting thing. That would be the ideal, where you're kind of intrigued about what will happen. I mean, just from like, yeah, it is. I mean, the world is a fairly wild place right now, and if you can be the perfect stoic and sort of remove yourself from it a little bit, it is almost entertaining, isn't it? Like, it's just so bizarre.
Yeah, it is. I got asked on a podcast, I was guesting on someone's show this week, and they asked me, like, what do you want to do in 50 years? Or what do you want written on your tombstone? And I've never really been that good at long-term planning. I think it's a function of being curious. If anyone is super, super curious, you're always aware of just how many things you're not doing rather than the things that you are. And that to me is just like, I don't know. I get the impression that when I start a family, I'm currently single and don't have kids, but I get the impression that when I start a family, that's probably going to be a sledgehammer of emotions that I'm not ready for. That's probably going to whitewash most of the other stuff that I do in my life. But I might be wrong. And given the fact that I don't have that input and I do tons of different things, I was like, I don't know, man. But that you've given me a comfort blanket there, man. Like, I've just got options. I've got optionality.
Yeah.
Talking about the absolute fundamentals, what is the fundamental best way for someone to start opening up the optionality they have in their life?
I think the single most important thing that anyone could do is probably to attack the financial side of things, only because, I'll tell you a little story. So I used to be a business reporter, had a good job, enjoyed it very much, but I was starting to get a bit bored and sort of getting that 3-year itch kind of thing. And I came across this subculture called financial independence, retire early, or the FIRE movement. And I started getting into their stuff, and their main thing is like you go into kind of hardcore frugality mode, and you think really carefully about what's important to you, and cut out any extraneous spending, repay debt aggressively. So I did that, and I saved like enough, a big enough chunk of change to eventually sort of quit my job, not in a permanent retirement sense, but in a sort of go take a sabbatical and work on other projects sense. And that was the lifestyle experiment that launched a 1,000 ships kind of thing. Like, that was the most powerful move that I've ever made, I think. And that is very accessible to most people. So
what was the figure that you hit?
I hit 100,000 New Zealand dollars. I think I hit it in the greenback about a year later. So enough money for me to go and travel and do my thing, and have some space to breathe and think about other projects, but not enough to retire on permanently. But just the principles of doing that are so powerful. And like, money is not quite the same thing as optionality, but it's a one of the most powerful ingredients, because if you have money, again, you have the right but not the obligation to spend it however you see fit. So you can't buy everything with money, but you can make a pretty good attempt at it. So one underrated way of, or maybe it's not underrated, but one powerful way of having more optionality is to use something like that frugal approach. I think, especially when you're a young man or young woman, and you don't necessarily have to have an extravagant lifestyle and try to keep up with your peers. You can just sort of, again, it's a short-term pain, long-term gain thing. You can just sort of set yourself up to be in a stronger position a little bit later down the track. So I would highly encourage anyone who's listening to this who is thinking about, like, if you don't feel powerful, if you don't feel like you're in a position where you could take a punt, where you could take a risk and start your own project, or where you could walk away from your job because you don't like your boss, you don't like your co-workers or something. I think if you want to give yourself some power, what you want to do is start being more intentional about your spending. I've got a lot of sort of tips in the book, and start trying to build up the net worth, start trying to get rid of debt. And then that puts you in a really strong position. You can walk away from a shitty situation. You can retrain or upskill. You can take a sabbatical to launch your passion project. You can cut back to part-time hours, maybe to spend more time with your family, or put more effort into your health, or whatever it might be. And I feel like that's an unusually accessible intervention that a lot of people could use. And with the exception of people who are really doing it tough and they're already sort of living on the smell of an oily rag, the great majority of young, tradespeople and professionals could use those strategies to get themselves in a good position. I think that's probably the simplest step to get started.
I remember I had a conversation while I was on a photo shoot, maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, with this older lady. She's probably about the age that I am now, so I'm 32. She's maybe like 32, something like that. She was telling me about her and her husband, and I'd just bought my second house, my first rental. So I had my own, and then I bought a second one for buy-to-let. And she's telling me, we've just got our 8th house, and I'm talking about all the different things. And I was like, so what's the plan? And she says, well, me and my husband have done all of this. We started a business together. We got married early at sort of 22. We started a business together and been working on this business and building up this property portfolio alongside it. Now we've got the manager that's been with us for ages. She's going to run the business, and we've front-loaded our wealth. And it was that term that stuck with me. She said, we've front-loaded our wealth acquisition to the point now where we're going to go travel the world for the next 4 years. And then we're going to settle down and we're going to start a family. And I was like,
that's amazing.
Holy fucking shit, that's it. If compounding is the 8th wonder of the world, which I think we all agree it is, then front-loading that wealth as quickly as possible, and it's something that I ended up doing purely by fortune rather than by design, but it's certainly put me in a strong position now. I have my house plus 3 other rentals, and I have a nice sort of steady pot of cash. And it also means that even my own home, because I let 2 rooms out to my buddies, even that's paid for. The whole world could go to hell in a handbasket, and I'd still, well, it has done this year. And financially, I know that I'm still sorted. And the converse of that is kind of the live young, wild and free advice that's often given to people. And I get that. Like, don't get me wrong, being young is a time for you to adventure and to do new things and to be a little bit reckless as well. But at the top of this episode, we talked about the number 1 rule of the game is to never be out of playing. And locking yourself in, going bankrupt, getting into a business at 23 years old with 0 business experience and some shady business partner, and having a bankruptcy on your record, or having a terrible credit rating because you've run up a ton of different cars on repayment finance, or a bunch of credit cards because you wanted a new 50-inch TV or whatever. Upside 50-inch TV, downside shit credit rating for the next decade. That's a pretty big asymmetric risk that you've got going on there. So yeah, certainly. And that the beautiful thing about front loading wealth is that you front load. If you haven't done it up until now is the time to start. You can be 75 listening to this, and you're better off front loading wealth than you are back loading it now. I had Morgan Housel on, the guy that wrote The Psychology of Money, and he said that 90% of Warren Buffett's net worth was generated after his 65th birthday.
Is that right? Holy shit.
That's how powerful compounding is.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, I'm all about that. Front load that wealth. Why didn't you decide, right, I've got my 100,000 here, I'm now going to continue to work and just build up like some insane amount of cash, and then go for not whatever it is, I can't remember what the first 2 letters are, retire early, financial independence, retire early. Why not like financial independence, retire at an all right age, but wealthy as fuck?
Yeah, well, so I could have done that. That was my initial plan. But the problem was that I was a journalist, and journalists are not really making bank. So it would have been a bit of a slog, and I wouldn't have retired super wealthy. I would have been, I would have had a pretty Spartan existence if I wanted to do the early retirement thing, which is fine. I'm actually okay with that. But what I wasn't okay with was sort of having this super distant, future-focused idea of distant happiness. So it took me right out of the moment, because this idea of financial independence, retire early, is like the whole point of the game is to check out the earliest opportunity. So it's a very kind of negative framing. Work is bad and you must escape, right? So I wasn't prepared to keep doing my job, which I was no longer wildly interested in, for 10 or 15 more years to get to the point where I could retire properly, because I had all these other things that I wanted to experiment with. And also I hadn't done my overseas experience, which is a sort of grand tradition in New Zealand. You have to go out and have your gap year or whatever, and do the banana pancake trail and that sort of thing. So I didn't want to squander my youth and my mobility and sort of lock myself into this future thing. So I just decided, like, I'm gonna pull the plug right now. This is enough to make some big changes to my life, and maybe look for some higher leverage opportunities. So like, being a salary earner is fine. It's great in many ways. It's sort of comfortable and you have that stability. But I think I like that Naval line that, the way to get wealthy is to own something, is to own a piece of something, like you with your houses, or, you with your podcast, or, you own a stake in a business, you start your own business. And the fundamental difference there is you capture the upside, right? Not your boss, not the shareholders of the conglomerate that you work for. Possibly there's a stronger element of downside risk, and it's a bit more of a speculative play, but you get to capture all the gravy. So that's like, I mean, thank God that I did quit my job and go off and wander and sort of try some of these higher leverage, more speculative plays, because that's actually how, the other path would have been okay. I could have gone back to work and had a pretty good existence, but like now I'm financially independent, just having, without having to work full time or do anything that I don't want to do.
What are the routes of leverage that you have favorited over the last few years?
So investing is my main thing, and that is how I've also sort of generated most of my wealth. So what I'm looking for is, again, asymmetries. I don't know if you want to get into investing at all, but like looking for neglected opportunities and things that kind of intersect with my own skill set or experience, or like things that are available to me that aren't necessarily available to everyone else. So I'm not talking about S&P 500, which every man and his dog can go on and trade. Things where you have some insider knowledge or you have a personal connection, and therefore there's an opportunity, there might be an asymmetry to exploit. And then the other things would include somewhat entrepreneurial ventures, like, I don't know if I'd call them entrepreneurial, but writing a blog, writing this book that I've just finished, where you're having a punt. You're, the downside cost is the time it takes you to write the thing, and sort of pay for various expenses. And then you give yourself a shot at, again, collecting quite a large upside, whether that comes financially, which is infamously difficult to make money through books, but it's always possible that you get the sleeper hit or the runaway hit. And then also in terms of creating other opportunities, so broadening your reach and your audience, and you never know who's going to read it and who's going to get in touch. So I suppose I spent my sabbatical collecting those kind of options, like meeting new people and trying some uncertain ventures that don't have a steady paycheck associated with them. And then, I've just been lucky that my stable of options have started paying off. Interestingly, after I'd written almost all of the book. So this is not a sort of one of those things where you create a cute story after the fact to explain your success. Like, I didn't know that this would happen, but I was putting myself in the best position possible for it to happen.
I love it, man. Speaking in Naval language, you're leveraging on media and capital. And the one that I feel like Naval actually misses off, which is kind of the social / network / renown effect. And it's a kind of a combination of all of those. Is there an elephant in the room, talking about what you've just brought up there, and then the point I made before about front loading your wealth? Is there a bit of an uncomfortable elephant in the room that there is, if you want to have a family, there is a little bit of a time bracket on this, that we need to spend a little bit of time avoiding debt and accruing fat stacks of cash? We also know, for most of us, we don't want to be a parent to a newborn child at 50. So there is a kind of a window in terms of long-term lifestyle design that we need to slot ourselves into. And for women, the window perhaps is made even smaller. Although, statistic from 2019 in the UK, more women had children over the age of 40 than under the age of 20 that year.
Wow.
Pretty cool stat.
Yeah.
But you understand the paradigm I'm talking about? I
do, yeah. So you're absolutely right, but I think the good news is that it's not necessarily a biphasic thing where you're in this mode now and then you switch to this mode after a certain point, or because you're having a family or whatever it might be. You can sort of move in and out of different modes. I'd probably, again, go back to the exploring and exploiting thing, or more risk on or risk off modes, and you can do that like multiple times throughout a lifetime. So my preferred model is for a young person. First, spend some time actually building some career capital. I reckon that's always the way to go. And what I mean by that is accumulate some skills, get paid to be less dumb, basically get a regular job. Like you'll also meet people through the job, hopefully, and you repay your student debt if you have one, or at least have a crack at it.
And also learn how the workplace works as well. Learn how to have a disagreement with your boss. Learn what it is to get up at 7 a.m. every day, etc., etc.
Yeah, and maybe get a taste for what you don't want in life too, I suppose. Like it's that thing. I don't know if anyone who's ever done like manual labor or maybe worked in a hospitality or in a restaurant, I think if you're in a shit job, not that I'm saying all those jobs are shit, I just mean if it happens to be a shitty version of that job, that's pretty good motivation, right? Like, you don't want to think of yourself like 40 years from now doing the same thing. So I think there's sort of a character building element to it as well, where everyone should really have to do that. But anyway, you go through a phase where you're trying to be useful, and you're young and dumb. You don't know anything. Like, just pick up skills, become useful. Then maybe you do your exploration, where you start. Maybe you go out into the world and you take risks because you don't have a mortgage necessarily. You don't have kids at that point. It's not a surprise that so many entrepreneurs are even in their late teens or early 20s. Like, it makes perfect sense. Then if your ambitions don't work out and you want to have a family or whatever, you can take risk off. You can sell your business if you got it started, or just sort of work a regular salary job and step things back. But that's not the end of the road. So, interesting statistics. I think the most successful entrepreneurs tend to be in their 50s or certainly older. Like, the Zuckerbergs of the world are actually, there's a lot of them, but that doesn't actually necessarily relate to their success, and it might even be the opposite.
Oh, so dude, they're incredibly rare. There's a really famous diagram floating around a couple of years ago where it was talking about the founders of some of the biggest companies in the world and when they founded the companies. And it was like Bill Gates in his 50s and Steve Jobs and blah, 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 blah. The only reason I can see that we have adolescents worth billions and billions of dollars is a function of the fact that Silicon Valley's valuations of companies has become completely detached from their actual worth. And it's more a quirk of the particular way that our economy is set up at the moment, i.e. Silicon Valley doesn't know what the fuck it's doing and is just chucking money at anything that moves in a desperate attempt that it's going to go to the moon. So yeah, I totally agree, man. You can win at almost every stage of life now. And there's these kids, these like I remember this 7 or 8 year old who had a YouTube channel reviewing toys, and he's like one of the biggest YouTubers in the world a couple of years ago. And you can flip that round to the Warren Buffett story where you make 65% or you make 90% of your net worth after your 65th birthday. Like there is a full lifetime of success opportunities, and you really, as long as you're never out of the game, you only need to hit that moonshot once. Ideally earlier on, because then you get more time to enjoy it, but you only need to get it right once.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, my own personal plan was, if my little ventures didn't pay off, because I do quite want to have a family at some point, I thought that I would return to the workforce and have a reasonable job and a good career, and maybe do the kids and house and family thing. And then, at some distant point down the track, save up another stack of cash, or get in a good financial position, and then go do something wild again. Like go try and start a company, or sell everything and go traveling, or whatever it might be.
I think, dude, I think that kind of, whatever you'd call it, that second youth, when the kids leave home, I think we're going to see that more as we've got more frictionless travel, people who've grown up with a traveling mindset and an entrepreneurial mindset, rather than the kids leaving home and your parents retiring to the country. It's like the kids leave home and your parents retire to 5 different countries a year, Airbnb-ing their way around the world, doing all of the stuff they just didn't quite have time to complete when they were 25. And I think that's going to be super cool. I certainly know, given my wanderlust, and it sounds like you've got the same, that would absolutely be something that I would be looking to do. Like, not just going away on wanky DFDS Seaways tours and cruises, which like everyone's mum and dad seem to be obsessed with at the moment. Like, you know, going and heading off to all the countries that you didn't get a chance to, or going on an expedition, or going dog sledding, you know, all that sort of stuff. I think that hopefully we'll see that, and it'd be a really fucking cool world if that was the case. And it's also going to plug a ton of wealth and income into more varied countries. You're going to take wealth that's being created in the developed world and plug it into the developing world in a really nice way.
Yeah, that's right. It's even doable with kids in tow. I mean, I don't know how much of a sort of a logistical mission that is, but when I've been wandering around, I've met a bunch of families who are actually doing the digital nomad lifestyle with their kids, and it's pretty cool for the kids because they get to, you know, like I'm thinking of this family who they've got two young boys, and the boys are in a Thai school learning Thai at this formative age, and that's normal for them. That's their life. So yeah, I think that's even a possibility as well as to make it sort of
so many options,
so
many options, Richard. Right, so you've got these 10 principles for optionality, and we've kind of gone through a few of them, but there's some in here that I think are really cool. So can we do a sort of a quick fire and have you just explain some of these to us?
Yeah, of course.
Perfect. So number 3, beware of geeks bearing formulas.
Yeah. So so in the world of finance, people love to come up with very fancy models that they think have some predictive power about what's going to happen to the stock market or oil or Bitcoin or whatever it might be. And they use these models to decide how much risk they're willing to take in terms of asset allocation and timing and all these kind of decisions that they have to make. Now, when people do that on their own behalf, that's okay. You know, you can be a trader, you can go on Wall Street bets, you can have a play, and if you screw up, then because your Fibonacci retracements were wrong or whatever, like that's on you, and you know, maybe it's a learning experience or something, right? But the danger is that everyone has exposure to the financial system as a whole, and people who are making these kind of decisions on your behalf because you know, they're investing your retirement fund for you, or pension fund, or whatever it might be. So there's this tendency throughout human history, but especially in the financial realm, to sort of have too much confidence in these predictive models, which only ever offer a very simplified version of like a complex, chaotic system. And then when the models are wrong, things work out very, very badly. So during the GFC, for example, actually during the credit crunch, there's this story I recount in the book where the Goldman Sachs guy whose fund has just lost 30% or something is saying like, "Oh, this was a 25 standard deviation move outside of our models, and it happened multiple days in a row. Like, it's a total freak accident." And the funny thing is that like these freak accidents happen all the time, and it's not that the universe is just sort of taking the piss. It's that the models are broken, the models are wrong. So the more general lesson to sort of extrapolate out from that is just if you're making any kind of decision that's based on an equation or a model, also very popular in the financial independence retire early movement, just don't put all your faith in it. Just remain open to the possibility that you might be wrong, or that your model might be wrong, and sort of plan accordingly. Because historically, if you sort of trust in the numbers too much, like so and so is a sure thing, you will be proven wrong in a sort of a devastating fashion.
So, around about once every decade as well.
Yeah. I mean, it will happen in your lifetime. Yeah, for sure.
Number 5, generating better options is much more important than trying to make perfect decisions.
So if you think about when you're going through daily life and you're just presented with this massively expensive array of options, and I mean expensive in terms of attention and mental bandwidth, and the vast majority of them just don't matter. So we're sort of blind to them because we are so used to it. But like what clothes you wear, what brand of cereal you're eating, and all the product selections that you make, the route that you drive, the people you associate with, the emails you check, the websites you look at, blah, 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 blah. Like if you add all of that up, we're talking about like millions of branching paths in front of you at any given point in time. You could order anything you want. You could look at any website on the entire internet or watch any TV show or film. So a lot of people try to optimize those branching trees of possibility. So sort through the umpteen different brands of detergent and figure out the exact best one for me, or like find out the exact TV show that I should watch, or like basically putting a ton of thought into these decisions that don't have any sort of asymmetric payoff, because you choose this brand of laundry detergent over that one. Like it's not going to be sort of wildly exciting either way, and your whites are whiter or whatever. So the point that I'm making there is that you don't need to worry about the vast majority of those of choices that are presented to you in daily life. You're much better off sort of pruning quite a lot of those pathways and trying to channel your efforts into looking for the actual asymmetric opportunities that are going to be powerful to you. So instead of walking down the breakfast cereal aisle and trying to decide which type of cereal you should eat, a higher leverage option to be thinking about is like, do I want to be eating cereal, or like, do I want to have breakfast at all? What is the concept of breakfast? Like, is this just a myth sold to us by Mr. Kellogg or whatever, right? So like, the point being not that you should skip breakfast, but just that like, maybe that's a more interesting, potentially rewarding option to think about than like the very specific difference between one brand and the other, and sort of scrutinizing ingredient panels and that sort of thing.
So go ahead. Sorry.
No, go on.
Going one level of abstraction back.
I was just going to say that with my tinfoil hat on, my conspiracy theory is that, like, I don't know if this is an exact deliberate ploy or not, but when you have all these options sort of dazzling you, you're essentially trapped, and this is what the consumer capitalist system wants from you, is to keep you obsessing over this narrow range of standardized options so that you don't make the big high leverage decisions to stop consuming in certain ways, or change up your life in a more meaningful way, because you're just constantly trying to make these low level, boring, low payoff decisions. Sorry, go on. You were going to say something.
Yeah. So the illusion of choice that we're given as a consumer still traps us in the matrix of making decisions as a consumer. It doesn't actually allow us out of the maze. It just gives us different flavors of cheese within it.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great way of putting it.
One of the things I thought, first off, a good heuristic, I suppose, would be to take one step of abstraction back from the question that you're asking and just think about it from first principles about, like, do I need to do this? Do I need to do X? Well, I get my car cleaned every Saturday. Okay, well, like, could you get away with getting it cleaned every other Saturday? Do you actually need to get it cleaned at all? Like, what's going to happen? Could you get it cleaned every 6 months? Is there a different way that you can get it cleaned? Can you go for a machine as a hand washer, this, that, and the other? Another thing that it made me think about is a Naval quote, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. And that very much, I think, talks about it speaks to a number of different things, but one of them is the obsessing that we happen to have over easy decisions, because it allows us to push away the difficult ones. So I'll never forget, This was when I was like maybe 23, 24. So I was on my way to buying my first house, and I was the director of a pretty successful events company, and I had a fair bit of money behind me. And I remember I must have spent 5 minutes debating between two different types of yogurt based on the deal that was on. It was like 4 for £3, or like 7 for £8, but there were different yogurts and there was some different flavors, and this one's got a little bit more protein, and there's a little bit more trans fats in the other one. And I remember I had to take that step back, go one level of abstraction away, and go, Chris, what on earth are you doing? Like, this is absolutely insane. In the time that you were here, you could have gone home and done something with far more leverage that would have genuinely added value to your life. But it's because I hadn't made the decision around which mortgage broker I wanted to use, or because I hadn't, the hard thing. I hadn't sent the application off to whatever lawyer company. That's what I was hiding from. And I really, that play stupid games, win stupid prizes, also ties into it's a really easy way to identify the negatively asymmetric games that we're talking about. So a stupid game is unprotected sex. A stupid game is texting whilst driving. A stupid game is putting your entire net worth into some expert algorithm trading advisor that some kid on Instagram's decided to tell you that you should use. And another one of those, the most obvious one, which really struck home at me that when I realized it, was, what is the prize you win for always responding to messages within 24 hours? Because we all do that. We all check our inboxes, our social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever it might be, TikTok. I don't know if TikTok has an inbox. We all check those. But what's the prize that you get for being the fastest replier in the lands? Like, genuinely, these people, especially as you start to accrue a little bit of social capital and you get more incoming than you have outgoing, and most of the incoming is people wanting something from you, whether it be an answer to a question or just the sense of belonging to do whatever. Like, that's cool, and satiating that desire is fine, and it's a nice way to connect. But what's the prize that you win for being the fastest person on the trigger for that? It's absolutely nothing. It's noise, not signal. And that...
Well, actually, the prize that you win is that people expect that from you as well in the future, and then it sort of becomes a trap of your own making.
It's a curse.
So I mean, that's my excuse for why I only reply to emails once a week or something. Thanks
Good.
For giving me that excuse.
That's fine. Spectacular success is a matter of putting irons in the fire.
Yeah, so this comes back to the idea of looking for these asymmetric opportunities and following your systems day in, day out. Basically, my frame on luck is that quite a lot of success in life does boil down to luck of one variety or another. Perhaps the sort of the genetic blessings that you've been bestowed with or not been bestowed with, or your parents have childhood traumas or whatever it might be. But you can't be fatalistic about it and sort of blame your entire station in life on, deterministic events. You actually do have to take responsibility. So how do you balance that? It's clearly not a matter of just, vibing with the universe and putting out your intentions, the secret style, but it's also, it's also not to say that there's nothing you can do. So my frame for optionality is, well, you can make your own luck. So look for those asymmetric opportunities and just snap them up. Just build a portfolio over years. And you don't know, you can never be sure if they will pay off if you take one of these speculative plays, and probably they won't. The chances are against you in any given one of them, but the idea is you're building a portfolio. One of them is going to pay off at some point in time, at which point you're going to be okay. So you just keep stacking up opportunities wherever you see them and maximizing your chances of getting lucky. So there's no guarantees. I can never say you're definitely going to, all your dreams are going to come true, and life's going to be sunshine and lollipops. But like, you can definitely put yourself in the position of getting a transformative upside, and it's that stoic principle again of focus on the things that are within your control. The universe could could either make you or break you at any point along the way, but you can give yourself the best possible chances of actually getting a good outcome.
Hoarding options indefinitely is for cowards.
Right. So if you are on your deathbed and you're very wealthy, then one view of the world is that you've done very well for yourself and are admirable, and another view of the world is that you've fucked up because it's that Jesus thing that a camel will pass through the eye of a needle more easily than a rich man will make it into the kingdom of God. So into heaven. Sorry. So optionality has diminishing returns because it's sort of raw potential, and you don't want to just be sitting on raw potential indefinitely. It's very useful to always maintain some level of optionality, but the point is to take risks. Like, the point is to do something and sort of leave the world in a better place than you found it. So looking at money, for example, if you have a bunch of money and you don't deploy it anywhere, you just sort of have it moldering away under your mattress or whatever it might be, you could have invested that money. You could have deployed the capital to the place where it can actually do the most good. Or you could have spent it and put it back into the economy, or you could have given it to someone who will get a much higher return on investment from that money. So if you're just hoarding options until the end of time, my argument is that once you've made good, once you've got yourself in a comfortable position, you're taking care of you and yours. I think it is sort of I don't necessarily want to frame it as a requirement, but like, it's a very attractive opportunity to use your expanded range of choices to help open up other people's options and capabilities. Just because you've already tapped out, you've hit the point of diminishing returns. You don't need more opportunities. You don't need more money. You don't need more friends, right? These things you can't have an infinite number. It's not going to help you, but it'll be transformative to other people. So this is sort of my sort of preaching bit, but like, yeah, I would like to see people open up their options in a selfish way, because why not? But also then use their position to help out other people.
I suppose this isn't just limited to financial either. So you can imagine someone perhaps in a relatively okay middle-class position who's maybe had a ton of different ideas, for invention. Maybe they're a low-level engineer or a coder or something like that, but it was safe for them to stay within the particular firm that they were at, and they made it to 55 and got a big fat pension because they've been with them for 30 years. But had they decided to deploy on some of those options, they could have had so much more flourishing. They would have felt better. The world would have actually been raised up. The whole consciousness of the world would have been improved because of whatever the cool thing is that they're going to do. So that would be hoarding options in one way. And then I suppose as well, people can hoard their networks. It's built into my blood because my business is that of a club promoter, that I adore linking people in. This guy, you need to get him on your podcast, and this author, you should speak to this person, and they're probably sick of it. They're probably sick of me constantly sending emails. Like poor Greg McEwen that wrote Essentialism. Like, I've become his booking agent, like constantly, mate, you need to go on Ben Bergeron's podcast, and this guy loves you, and this guy loves you. It's just as well he's got an assistant, so he's not being hassled with it. But my point is that a lot of the time you can imagine someone would not only hoard perhaps money, they would hoard intellectual wealth, and some of that would be conscious, i.e. a fear of committing to it, because as soon as you put a target or a goal out into the world, you give yourself the chance of not achieving it, which is failure, which is scary. But another side of it would be someone consciously doing it. I don't want to share my insights about the financial market, my networks about this, my spare room in the house, which is currently unoccupied, at a lower rental rate that allows a family to move in, or all of these different things. There's a ton of different ways that people can be cowardly by not acting on options. And certainly this year for me, I've thought that trying to err on the side of action first. In my experience, we all are quite hesitant creatures, and that makes sense because we're both predator and prey evolutionarily, which is an odd situation to be in. We can be eaten by stuff, but we also eat stuff. So we're tentative by nature, but erring on the side of action. David Allen's 2-minute rule is like a really good one for just day-to-day stuff. But even bigger than that, like, okay, what would it take for me to get the minimum viable product of me starting this thing going? Or me beginning that friendship with that person, or me saying something to that girl over the far side of the room, or pick whatever it is that you want. Having that conversation with my boss that I think treats me a little bit badly. All of these different things, until you put them out into the world, until you actually decide to commit, they're just notions. They're just fucking ephemeral clouds, these weird thoughts that no other human except for you are going to be aware of. And erring on that action-first mindset is something that I definitely want to cultivate more in myself, and I think a lot of other people would benefit from too.
Yeah, I agree. I think especially if the costs of doing so are minimal, and it's basically like a motivational issue or just pulling finger. Like, just make a little experiment, make a small bet, and then iterate. Right? Like, if it, you'll learn something from it. But yeah, I like that framing. I think you should definitely be trying to get more data about the world as quickly as you can, which will usually look like doing something. Just make sure it's a reversible thing, or that it doesn't expose you to any kind of large obligation.
Yes.
And then take the action.
Yeah. What is a concept from Taleb that more people need to know about? One that perhaps isn't as common as the black swans and anti-fragility and stuff like that.
Yeah. I love his idea of a barbell strategy. Well, it's not actually Taleb's idea, but he does write about it, which is basically taking a sort of bimodal approach to life, where you're extremely extreme and aggressive in one particular domain, and then you're very conservative, like hyper conservative at the same time. So you can think about like a barbell. There's one big lump, and then there's another big lump, and then there's nothing, and there's just a thin line in the middle. So I've found that really useful in all sorts of areas, actually. So just to give you an example, I have this like barbell strategy for buying stuff. So what that means is I want to have the best in class stuff, things that really bring me joy and that I love, and that they might be quite expensive, and that are very good quality. Or I want to have like whatever the cheapest version of that is, like the thing that I pick up at the thrift shop without giving any particular thought to, or the thing maybe I buy some fast fashion item or something because I don't particularly care about it. And then I want to have nothing in the middle. I don't want to have like middle of the road stuff where I have to think about it and it's not that great, or I pay quite a lot of coin for it and it's not going to last me very long. So yeah, I found that quite liberating. Thinking about also forces you to think about like what is worth having, what is worth concentrating on.
What are some of the examples of products that you've applied that thought process to?
Yeah, so I have there's a community called Buy It for Life on Reddit, which I think is pretty cool. And maybe I'll give you some context. I've been traveling for about 4 years since I quit my job, and I've been living out of a suitcase. So I haven't owned anything, and I got rid of everything before I left. So I had my sort of core kit of clothing that I could wear over and over again. It's made out of merino wool. And that's expensive, and then I put some thought into acquiring. And then I'd also just pick up sort of bits and pieces as I was traveling, with basically no thought put into them, like a t-shirt for working out or whatever. And then if it gets dirty or stolen or something, I don't care. It's just it cost me $2 or whatever it might be. And then since coming back to New Zealand, I'm sort of thinking of moving into getting settled down a little bit and actually wanting to acquire possessions. So I'm using the principles of this Buy It for Life community to think about what are the things that I will have, that I could potentially buy forever. So right now I'm researching chef's knives and pots and pans.
That's cool.
I want to get it once, and I want to look after it and be intentional about it and care for it forever. So this is on my hyper sort of aggressive, expensive end of the barbell. Something that I will use every day. I'll get a lot of utility out of and pleasure out of. And that's worth actually diving through that annoying consumer capitalism labyrinth for. But I don't want to do that like with some middle of the road stuff and do it 5 years later when this one craps out on me, you know?
Yeah, that is cool. I had a Rory Sutherland on the show recently, a behavioral economist from Ogilvy Advertising, one of the most unique force of nature humans on the planet. And he was talking about
he's great.
Exactly the same thing. And he spoke about how he thinks middle of the road fashion is dead. So the Marks and Spencers or the Debenhams of the world, which is sort of 50 quid for a pair of jeans, or, you know, sort of 35 quid for a t-shirt, is just, from a psychological perspective, totally mute, because you get a particular rush when you get a bargain, when you get a wear it once for a fiver piece of clothing, and you also get a nice rush and a sense of satisfaction when you buy 130 quid pair of replay jeans that you know are going to be around for a decade, but you don't really actually get any sense. It's just how I've paid a fair price for a fair item. Like, this isn't exciting. Like, it's okayly made. I'm not really that excited about it. I'm gonna have to care about it, but I didn't really pay that much to care about it that much. It's just so vanilla. And yeah, man, the barbell strategy is one also that I'm a huge fan of from Taleb. Richard, man, I really, really have enjoyed today. It feels like we could have done many more of these, and perhaps we will do in the future. Optionality, How to Survive and Thrive in a Volatile World, will be linked in the show notes below on Amazon. If this has been the sort of thing that you've enjoyed today, then I highly recommend that you go and pick it up. Any other things that you want to plug? Where else should people check you out online?
Yeah, I think come and say hello at my blog, which is thedeepdish.org. I encourage people to reach out and say hello because, you know, I want to build out my network, and it's one of those cheap options to take out. And yeah, if you want to know about the book, go to optionalitybook.com and you can see a little preview and some what people are saying, and also get links to the various retailers.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for today.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Pleasure.